there in '69, and that was the kind of a breakthrough that led to more black journalists getting hired and promoted, and a number of people in recent years who remember well the sort of milestones that were made. So I'm starting to ramble, which I'm really good at in my old age, which began much too soon. But nevertheless, I think uh, there's a need for us to remember the kind of contributions Jackson made, while at the same time, so it's not just all a love fest. We also had a sense of being, oh, here comes Jesse again with another story idea. Well, I got to mention his penchant for 5:30 a.m. phone calls to your house to let you know about another hot story that we really have to cover now. And I've seen this happen over the years to a remarkable degree. In any case, thank you all very much for giving me a chance here to voice a few old man's recollections and carry on.
Thank you, Clarence. Okay. Now, Hazel, I'll try Sydney wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Richard.
please identify yourself, please, also.
Hazel Trice Edney, editor-in-chief of the Trice Edney Newswire, president CEO of Trice Edney Communications. Could I get Jackie to put that picture up? I don't know if he's able to put that picture up or not. I want to show you all something. It is actually my first time covering Reverend Jesse Jackson. It was in Jesse 88. Put up the other one, the bigger one, because you can probably see it a little bit clearer. And the reason that you all cannot see the photo in its actual form is because I've lost the photo. And so there is a picture actually, well, you can just put up the one you put up. Okay, there it is. You can see in the background, you can see I had it on my wall when I was at the Richmond Afro-American newspaper. And you can probably see it better than the blurry one that he just showed. But I can't find the photograph, and I wanted to actually be the cover of my book. So I'm going to have to doggedly see if I can find the something that I can pull up, because the photographer actually died. And so I wanted you to see that picture because you will see two people on the either side of him, his security people, and they were pushing me back and telling me I could not interview Reverend Jackson. I was just a cub reporter, and I was doggedly trying to get to him. He was in Richmond. You can see the Richmond Coliseum behind us. But anyway, he turned to me, and if you could see it close up, then you could see that I had pen and pad ready. And he turned to me and he said, "Come on, baby." Not in not in a flirtatious way, but in a way that was so respectful and so kind. And that is one of the things that I think we need to remember about Reverend Jackson and to know about him, because he ain't going nowhere yet. So we need to know about him, is that his kindness is so genuine. And although they say, the most dangerous place in America, in the world, is between Jesse Jackson and the camera. Well, I truly
That's
believe
funny.
well, that's not an original. That's George Carey. George taught me that
Right.
one.
Well, yeah, well, I can tell you about
God
George
rest
too.
his soul.
Yes. And George pulled me even closer to Reverend Jackson. It was from this picture where I interviewed him in Jesse 88 that I actually was able to interview him so much over the years. But the first thing I want us to remember is the kindness and just how he really pulled in Black reporters from the Black press, from the reporters, regardless of where you were, Chicago Tribune, etc. But also, Reverend Jackson is known to the world. He is a world hero. I want us to remember that. He's not just an American hero. I got a chance through George Carey when I was at NNPA. I got a chance to travel with Reverend Jackson and George and his team. We went to London. We went to Liverpool. And I got a chance to see Reverend Jackson on the world stage and how he was, even more so than America in a lot of ways, how he was reverenced. I mean, he would walk into the room, he would walk into a church in London, and people would bounce to their feet. They knew this man as a world leader, probably because of some of the things that he had done, you know, rescuing people, etc., but also because of his voice, the power of words. He mastered those power of words. We should also remember the fact that he opened so many doors, not just for Black journalists, but as has been mentioned earlier, he opened doors for for other Black politicians, and he did it without even having to become a politician himself. I mean, of course, he ran for president, but most of what he has accomplished and he has taught us and he has taught the world as just being a leader and an actual minister. And so, being from Virginia, I can say that there would have not been an L. Douglas Wilder had it not been for a Jesse 88. And then there was the Barack Obama that followed, and then Kamala Harris. President Donald Trump has never won Virginia. And I believe that that is in part because of the doors that Reverend Jackson opened with Jesse 88 and the Rainbow Coalition. That coalition rises up and comes together when we really absolutely need it. I just wish it was in other states, but when we really
Hazel,
absolutely need it.
we gotta wrap it up.
Okay, I'm finished.
Thank you.
Can I share a comment, Mr. Prince?
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. And since you mentioned about the worldwide, I have to. Some may know that journalism has a correspondent in Cuba, and he emailed me, messaged me before this meeting to talk about the fact that Jesse Jackson had liberated some political prisoners in Cuba, and so that should be mentioned also.
Is that my picture with Castro?
Yes, yes, yes. In fact,
Mr. Prince, I'd like to
post
speak
as well.
if I get a chance. Okay.
Okay, wait, but let me go to Bruce Talamon since we're talking about photography. Bruce, are you there? Bruce, you must just speak for a minute.
Unmute yourself, Bruce.
Okay.
You're muted.
I was trying to follow the rules.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm Bruce Talamon.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Formerly of Time Magazine, and I also want to say that it's really good to see some faces that I haven't seen and hear some voices that I hadn't seen in a while since 1984. I met so many folks, through that campaign. I do have a few photographs from that adventure, and but I also wanted to say Alelia and Marquita mentioned something earlier about opportunities and also about how in a lot of cases, not a lot of cases, a number of cases, people were not enthusiastic, shall we say, to cover Reverend Jackson. And that's actually the way that I got the job for Time Magazine, because actually the short version is that I was introduced to the photo editor at the time, Arnold Drapkin, and he's the guy that gave out the big assignments, and I got introduced to him literally on a closing day when all hell was breaking loose on a Friday. And I mean, Jack can remember those days. And the thing was, though, I go into his office, I show him my portfolio, and Neil Leifer, the great sports photographer, had brought me in because I was working on movies. I was doing that, and Neil said, if you ever get to to New York, I'll take you up to meet Arnold Drapkin. You should be working for Time Magazine. And so after he sees the portfolio, he says, what would you, how would you like to work with us? And I was trying to be coy And I said, well, actually, I'd really like to work on the Democratic, one of the Democratic candidates. And the man looked at me and laughed. And he said, are you kidding? He says, I've got guys outside of my door having fistfights over who's going to cover Alan Cranston. And I said, well, I'm not worried about Alan Cranston. I said, I'd like to cover Jesse Jackson. And he says, you've got the job. Nobody wanted Jesse. And the reason that I came to understand was because if you were working at that time, and actually even today, if you were working for, AP, Time Magazine, Newsweek, and your candidate went all the way, you were generally offered the job of White House photographer. And so, folks looked up and down at Jesse and said, "Oh, he'll be gone by Super Tuesday." And to Jack's point, they did not understand that this was not a traditional campaign. This was a crusade. And I ended up, I think I told somebody, I think I had a 6-month job, every day, and went everywhere except Syria, because at that point, when Syria happened, Time said, "Oh well, we have a stringer, and he'll meet up with you all and take photographs." And of course, the Jesse train moved quickly and in wild ways, and that stringer never made it. But and then when Jesse decided to go to Cuba, they said, "You're going." But seriously, I look at the visual impact that was had, and I was one of the things I've got a few photographs, but I have 3 specific photographs of I was fascinated of how young black boys related to him and tried to touch him and could wiggle their way and worm their way past Secret Service, and all of a sudden they're underneath him, damn near literally underneath him. And I was I was thinking about campaigning and how he would do those sleepovers. Everybody talks, today, everybody's talking about how far people are out of touch and candidates, because they're up here and, they'll shake hands at a rope line or something like that. But who's the last one who actually went to somebody's house and slept in their guest bedroom and then turned around and to talk about how much eggs cost, and I'm fascinated by the fact that Jesse did that, and it seemed to generate interest in the campaign, and a lot of people. I mean, my pictures can prove, there was a lot of black folks, but there were a lot of white folks that came out, and it did get bigger, as Jack pointed out, that it was a black campaign, but then it got larger, and it was something to see. I was thinking maybe, Richard, because I don't want to bore anybody, maybe at the end we could run my pictures or something.
Long tail.
What's that?
Oh, Bruce, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Lost you. Okay. What about the pictures you have to show us?
Oh,
He said we're not
well,
turn them at the end.
Oh, at the
He
end.
just suggested that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I missed that part.
well, yeah, I suggested either that or, I mean, I could run through them now. I mean, it's if I can, I am not technically
Probably
Okay.
the end. Probably the end will work. I want to see those pictures.
Wait a minute. Okay, I did something to share. Now, what am I
Put them in
doing?
share.
Yes. And aha. Okay,
There
here
you
we go. Let's see.
I would look that.
Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll see your index.
Jacques and wait a minute. Hold on. Wait a minute. I don't
It's covering the pictures. So there you go.
There you go. There you go.
All right.
Yes.
Yes.
We can see them.
Okay. So that is the Jackson plane, and of course you can see the latest technology props. But no, seriously, the fellow next to me is the late Jacques Chenet from Newsweek, and we were there along with Michael Cheers. The three of us were there all the way to the end. So anyway, let's see. Oh, we don't need to see that. That was a wait a minute. Here we go. Okay, hold on. Yeah. Whoops, it just went the wrong way. Sorry, hold on. Back then we didn't have digital, so you had someone pick up your film, which was a little wild. Okay, and then I got to go back to this, and we go. This was literally the day he announced at the Capitol Center on November 3rd. And what I wanted to bring was just to show a little bit of the thinking process, when I was shooting, and this was a monumental occasion for him. And you can still see everything?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So, well, I don't, okay, here we go. Wait, why is it scooting all over the place? Marion Barry had actually given Jesse, or lent Jesse, his protection detail, because Jesse did not have Secret Service yet. And and the reason I like this photograph is because his boys were with him, and this was again in the holding room at the Capitol Center. So okay, come on. And yes, Hal Raines wrote an interesting piece that day, and one of the things he said was the speech also it seemed designed to dash with surprising sharpness the hopes of his Democratic rivals that Mr. Jackson's campaign would be a voter registration crusade rather than a full cry effort to challenge the party. So I thought that was interesting. And I've always loved this photograph. And when I saw it, I thought it was, just something interesting. The Time magazine people weren't thrilled. But black folk vote, colored people don't. Jackson for president. Now is the time. In a church. I tell young and mid-career photographers to pay attention. It's all around you. And it might not be, right up at the dais. And, I also wanted to show this. That's the point blank bulletproof vest that he wore. And on this particular day, he was in Chicago, and I think it's sort of poignant. He was
He hated that vest.
what's that?
He hated that vest. He hated.
Oh
to
yeah,
put that
yeah.
on.
He hated that vest, and he wore that bad boy too.
Put it on, but he hated it.
And he was saying goodbye to his boys. And I turned around and I happened to see that vest that he had to put on. And New Hampshire, and I gotta say, ain't nobody of the colored persuasion in that room. So he did reach an interesting crowd. I've often wondered the guy who's holding the Jesse Jackson sign. I often wonder what happened to him. I mean, I'm sure he's gone now, but um, and this is the night of the Hymietown apology, and I, I mean, the press could not get in, and the press could not, nobody was allowing any access, well, I walked on up to him, and I had the weirdness to say, I need to be in the room, and he said, "All right, come on." So there we were. Hold on.
Wait.
And
Chris, where is this taking place?
this is taking place in
New York.
the rabbi is a fellow named Rabbi Arthur Starr, and he lent, this is his office there, and he lent his office to Jesse to write his, and to go over and work out his speech that night. And I just remember pissing Jack White off because I didn't want to walk in there with all of my cameras. So I took two cameras in, and I turned around and I went up to Jack and I said, "Jack, hold these." And I just remember the look, but I do understand. And this is can you see the guy down on the let me see if I can, that's him. That's Rabbi Starr. And so he was just sort of, I turned around and he was sort of watching this whole thing unfold in his temple and in his office. And that was a little interesting. And proof sheets tell you a lot, because look at some of these people in there. I mean, you've got, Frank's back there, Frank Watkins, and there. Who's that in the back? That's campaign manager, not Lamont, but
Preston Love.
It's
Preston.
Arnold. Is it Preston Love, or I can't see the picture? Is it Arnold Pinckney?
Oh, okay. It's Arnold Pinckney and Preston Love.
Preston Love. Yes.
And I'm sorry you can't see the thing, Jack. But so wait, a couple more. Now this proof sheet, I looked at. I was looking at the proof, and I wanted to include this, and you'll see in a moment why. So we've got a Secret Service agent here on the left observing Rabbi Starr and his family as they're outside of the room looking in, and you can see Jesse and on the phone, talking business, but also, getting advice from folks. But here it is, large, without the Secret Service agent and without the markings. I think sometimes proof sheets are important to show your to show the thought process of the photographer. And this was directly after that night, and we were just in a coffee shop, and I turned around and I saw Jackie, just the way she was looking at him. And I would like to think that there's just her eyes told the whole story. And okay. See what I mean about the young black boys?
Mhm.
I mean, look, whoops, hold on. That young man has caught his attention, and he's almost surfing over the heads of Secret Service and everybody else to just touch him. It's crazy. So and now this little fella, he got a little closer, and it was just interesting to me the lengths that these young boys would go to be near him. And I think about that picture years later of Obama, leaning down so the little boy could touch his head.
Oh,
And I like I look at this picture now. In the back there, you can see George Curry, right behind the or not behind, but to the left of the young kid. And on this particular one. Now, it was dark down there and I had a flash so I was able to take the flash off my camera and pop, just pop some light in so I could get it and without overpowering the scene. And it just kind of worked and I was lucky. But and we went everywhere, as you can see. We went to the Florida Strawberry Festival, and a number of the black journalists were hoping that Jesse didn't do anything wild down there, like kiss those girls. So we weren't. I think, as I remember, Sylvester Monroe and Curry were planning a way to escape.
Well, it's the only time that
I
I ever heard, Bruce, it's the only time that I ever heard Jesse flustered. He was, somebody burst a balloon and everybody jumped because we had already encountered a guy who said, we don't need no black candidates down here. Y'all can go on where you came from. And Jesse was doing a speech and when he used to say, up with hope, down with dope. Put hope in your vein, hope in your brain, and dope in your not dope in your vein, and he had it backwards. And he was so that balloon.
Well, so you're saying they got his attention?
They got his attention.
Yeah, this was New Mexico, and those rope lines were just crazy because we had to work out Jacques and I had to work out a system with the Secret Service, and they were very very helpful.
Yeah, Bruce, can we come back to these at the end because we got to move on to the
Yes,
next
absolutely.
Okay, we'll do that then. Now, I think Barbara Reynolds had a question that she raised about Milton Coleman's reporting and whether it was good or bad.
And I want to make a comment too, Richard, when you get a chance.
Yes, okay. Was that
Jerry?
Yeah,
Jerry.
Jerry. Okay, anybody want to answer that question for Barbara about the reporting on
What is the question?
What is the question? Was that well, Barbara, you can ask the question yourself.
Yeah, the whole Jaime controversy, as I can remember it, Milton Coleman was the one who first published it, I think, and I've heard that was terrible. I heard that that's what a reporter was supposed to do. I just wonder how it's thought about today, or is it relevant?
Well, I think it's relevant only in the sense that, first of all, and Jack can tell you more about this. Milton Coleman never heard Reverend Jackson say that. He heard another reporter, being Jack White, say that Jesse had used that language. Milton then said that he was going to put it in the paper. Jack White, Kenny Walker, George Curry, and I, standing outside the hospital where Viola Louisa was killed, were having that conversation. We thought nothing of it. Later, in a story published by, I believe, Rick Atkinson, which was a story about Push Excel. Way down in that story, it's reported that in a paragraph that Jesse had used that language, saying that, referring to Jews as Jaime and New York as Jaimetown. Nobody paid any attention. 2 days later, that was a Thursday. 2 days later, we're in Albany, New York. The Washington Post follows up with an editorial bringing attention to that paragraph in that story. It was then only weeks later that Milton Coleman wrote a piece explaining how and why this supposedly happened. Milton's version was that we were sitting at the Butler Aviation Terminal in Washington, D.C., waiting for a plane. He, Reverend Jackson, and Gerald Boyd. And he says, Jesse allegedly said, got to go up to Jaimetown and talk to the Jaimes. Well, first of all, he said, that Jesse said, let's talk black talk. I got to go up to New York, up to Jaimetown, and talk to the Jaimes. Well, in a book that was never published, that George Curry and Kenny Walker and I did in 1985, a political biography of Reverend Jackson, we interviewed Gerald Boyd, who was there for the whole time, and said that Jesse never made those statements. He never said anything like that. Milton's account of how this happened and why he broke what he admitted was supposedly an off-the-record conversation was that it was so important. It was so important that he thought the readers needed to know, and so forth. But anyway, that's the short. That is the truth of this, that Milton never heard this. And we took him to task, and George Curry, Kenny Walker, and I took him to task in the book, not because he betrayed some trust to the Black community or Jesse or Black, but because it was unprofessional. If it was important enough for him to break an off-the-record conversation, it should have been reported fully, promptly, and under his own byline. But that never happened. And that is the story of how
that's important
because can I comment on this since you
Excuse me.
there was a big problem. One of the big problems with Jesse was that there are certain rules that journalists have agreed to over the years when they were covering political situations and major figures. And one is the use of the terms off the record, background, on the record, and so forth. Jesse didn't use those terms. As Sylvester just pointed out, he would say, let's talk black talk, or he would say, take off your reporter's hat and put on your black hat. One of the things that was happening at the time that this occurred was there were several of us who were aware of Jesse's use of this language. We were trying to figure out what we could do with it journalistically, because if let's talk black talk meant off the record and you agreed to it, you couldn't use it. If it meant, as Milton contended in that article that Sylvester just mentioned, that it meant on background, it meant you could use it but not attribute it to anybody specific. Now, I always took it to mean that it was off the record. I had actually mentioned to my editors at the time, a couple of months before the story broke, that Jesse used this language in a confidential memo that would circulate among the editors in New York. That I knew about this, and that I was hoping that they would come back to me and we could have some kind of discussion and try to figure out how ethically, as I say, it's an ethical situation. If you agree that something's off the record, you can't use it. If you agree that something's on background, you can use it, but you can't attribute it. If it's on the record, you can use it, you can attribute it. Jesse didn't use that language. What were we supposed to make of it? So there was some discussion between several of us at that time, the best will remember, about what are we supposed to do with this stuff. Now, I wasn't there when Milton says that he heard Jesse use that language. He contended that was that Jesse, when he said let's talk black talk, that he meant on background. I find that extremely hard to believe that Jesse was agreeing that you could attribute his use of this terminology, that you could use that without attributing to it. I find that extremely hard to believe that that's what Jesse would have wanted.
Yeah.
But but again, it's this ambiguity. It was the difficulty. It was a journalistic challenge. It was something that was hard for us to figure out. Milton was certainly aware of the conversations that we were having between a relatively small group of the original alligators,
Right.
who were aware of this language, but trying to figure it out. And it was not an easy question, because if you break an agreement to be something to be off the record, you've broken a promise to a source.
Yeah.
So it wasn't. This was not an easy situation for any of us, and I hope we would not have to rehash it now. But one final comment about this, and it reminded of it by looking at seeing Bruce's photographs of the crowd that Jesse was attracting in New Hampshire. He had just returned just briefly before that from Syria, where he had brought back Navy flyer Robert Goodman. Ronald Reagan had sent Air Force One to Germany to pick us up and bring us back. Jesse was a huge hero, and he was breaking through, and he was rising in the polls in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
So when this story about this Jaime business broke, it really put a real prick in a balloon that was swelling and getting bigger and larger. And the impact of it was enormous. Some of you recall that at Savior's Day in Chicago that year, that Louis Farrakhan had a rally there, which he mentioned at that rally, and he used some very provocative language about what the consequences would be if anybody attacked Jesse at that time. Jesse's political career, it looked like it was going in one direction, and it went in a different direction because of this Town business. And there were a lot of people who felt that Milton had, done something terribly wrong. I don't look at it. I'm like Sylvester. I don't look at it in terms of its political impact, because it's not our job to decide what the consequences of something would be. But we do have rules that we follow as journalists, and I really had raised some questions about what was really the appropriate way to handle this story.
Yeah, I want to just add this to it if I can, because in 1988, I suppose it was, that 60 Minutes came and sent a reporter to sit on my front porch and talk to me, and the National Enquirer. There was something that they were trying to find out. And National Enquirer offered me, 5 figures if I would just tell them what they wanted to know. And of course, Jesse didn't know. And I never said anything about it. And I just hoped nobody else would say anything about it. And nobody did. So, I mean, I think that some of us did weigh when we see that someone is trying to do something good for Black people, and in the world, really, and make a mistake. Do we help the other side? And I think some of us had to deal
what do they want you to say
with that kind of situation.
Barbara,
Do we tell it all when we know that it's going to destroy people's hopes and dreams? That's a question that I had to deal with, in some of reporters I knew had to deal with it in the Jackson camp. Do we tell it all?
Yeah,
Barbara.
I have a quick question. Did anyone, I don't know, didn't follow the rest of the reporting after all of this, but does Sylvester or Jack, or does anybody know whether or not anyone actually went to Jesse and asked him directly, did you say this?
Yes, we all did.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. Oh yes.
And did he say
Yes.
his response?
His answer, his public answer was, "I have no recollection of having made that statement to Milton Coleman." He never denied that at some point he had used the language. I mean, in fact, he came to a top of the week, what we call the top of the week luncheon with Katharine Graham and the editors of Newsweek, and we discussed this. And Jesse tried to explain it as, at that time, as, you know, this was nothing. If I did use that language, it certainly had nothing to do with anti-Semitism. I grew up in Chicago, you know, and that's when I cringed and fell under the table. But Jesse was sitting there with Katharine Graham going, you know, it's like Hymie-Stymie buckwheat. You know, it's a term of endearment.
Yeah, I think Sylvester's making an important point here. Jesse had a way of characterizing, this was another problem, of characterizing different ethnic groups. For example, he would refer to Southern Black people as Mose and Moselle. Some of you all may remember that. So he had these terms. Now, obviously, Jesse was not anti-Black. So if he called somebody Mose and Moselle, we knew what he was talking about, and it was a kind of a familiarity. I never thought that Jesse Jackson was an anti-Semite. I don't believe that to this day. He grew up in a place where he didn't grow up in a place like in some northern urban cities where Jews, and there was conflict between Jewish merchants and African American customers. He grew up in the small town in Greenville, where the merchants were of other ethnic groups in that. I don't think he ever had that, but I do think what he had was he was trying to work us all the time. And in that respect, he was in no way different than any other major public figure or any other politician trying to control the narrative by influencing the way that reporters reacted to him or evaluated what he was saying. And in his case, he would this business about take your black hat off or take your reporter's hat off and your black hat off. It's a pretension. I'm going to let you in on a secret.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm this is a way of, I'm going to tell you something I'm not telling other people. I trust you. Your significance of you as a journalist, all the rest of this stuff. A lot of us, a bunch of us, George Curry and Kenny Walker and Sylvester Knight, we knew Jesse before this campaign. His ability to work us had long since been exhausted. I mean, we knew who he was. He couldn't, so again, it was a question of trying to be fair, trying to be professional, and I have to mildly disagree with Barbara about this. I've long believed that a Black journalist's job is not to try to think about what defending or protecting, but it is always to understand the context in which people are operating and the background, and that's different than trying to be in somebody's pocket or trying to think about we can't destroy somebody down the line. Jesse used that language. There's no doubt about it. And he used it to the point where there were people in his campaign, his people around him, who were concerned about it because they knew it eventually was going to be found out by a whole bunch of people, and they knew it was going to be damaging when it was found out, and they were trying to get him to stop, and he wouldn't. Now, there were a few of us who happened to be at his house on the night when Farrakhan held that rally.
Yes, we were.
In Chicago. Bruce was there, Bess was there, Kenny, some others. I think maybe there were half dozen of us there. Does that seem about right to you?
Yeah. Curry.
Jesse was saying stuff at that table. I mean, you all remember he was saying, I hope we were eating pork chops cooked by Mrs. Jackson. And Jesse was making, satirical comments about the Black Muslims who were going to be our host that night, saying, I hope they don't have a pork detector. It was all this stuff,
Oh
it,
God.
but if you knew him, and if you had spent years, covering Black America, it wasn't just because you were Black, but you were journalistically involved in covering Black America. You understood the context in which these things were happening. And again, it raised, in some cases it helped, and in some cases it raised the limit, because you didn't really, what exactly does Let's Talk Black Talk translate to in terms of journalistic ethics? What does it mean? It's off the record? Does it mean it's on background? Does it mean it's on? What does it mean? And you would ask your people around him, and they didn't have any more of a clue than you did, because the truth is, I remember, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about this. I remember there was one really one of the Black reporters who came out, and he was writing for a very influential publication. He's writing these stories about the Jackson campaign is doing this and this and this and this, and it reminded me of that Howell Raines business back there. And like they had a real strategy, like they were just making that stuff up as they went along. Sometimes they would change it. We'd be in the air in an airplane. We were heading to one city, and they'd come up and say, "No, we're not going there. We're going someplace else." And they're pretending, it was a crusade. It was a big difference between the 84 campaign and the 88 campaign, which was a more professionally managed, more conventional campaign. It was in a lot of ways a lot easier, because they had pros like, I can't remember the name, David Borsage and people like that running that campaign, and they knew how to do it. And I'm sorry, one final thing. I was moved from Jackson's campaign to the Mondale campaign afterwards. And all these people had talked to me, all these white political journalists had been talking about how difficult it was, the challenges and whatnot. Shoot, after covering Jesse Jackson, Walter Mondale, it was as easy as pie.
Right.
It was easy.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jack. We only have about 15 minutes left. I want to also mention that Milton Coleman respectfully declined to be a part of this conversation.
Of course.
I wanted to ask Barbara Reynolds, what is it that they were trying to get you to say that you didn't want to say?
I can't say.
Oh.
I can't say. I didn't say, and I can't say.
Okay. All right. I want to ask Adam Powell, since he produced the television show, if he has any thoughts on the whole subject we're talking about, the significance of Jesse Jackson and what we should remember about him.
Thanks, Richard. My relationship with the Reverend came years later than most of those on the call. The first long conversation I had with him was actually in 1986, when he called me out of the blue to ask me not to accept the offer of to be NPR's vice president of news. And his words that he repeated were, "Those racist white boys will tear you apart. You're used to CBS News, a gentleman's club. They're a frat house." And then he informed me, which NPR hadn't, that NPR was under a federal consent decree preventing them from hiring or promoting people without the approval of a federal judge, because of their history of racist hiring and promotion. So that was the first long conversation I had with him. But then in 1990, I started working with him. Quincy Jones saw me literally in a movie theater and waved me over. And it was about 11:30 at night. The feature was a documentary on the life of Quincy Jones. And a process began, which I saw many times. He saw me and wanted me to do something, but of course he wouldn't tell me what it was. So the next day we got on the Warner jet, flew from New York to Washington, went to the hotel where Quincy used to stay. Now he stays. He later stayed at the Four Seasons. Opened the door to his suite, and there's Reverend Jackson sitting there saying, "Q, will he do it?" And well, what Quincy and the Reverend had in mind was that I would become an executive producer, the executive producer at Quincy Jones Entertainment. Don't touch Fresh Prince. It was a hit, but Jesse needed to be rescued. In 3 weeks, his weekly 1 hour show was $1 million over budget, and the ratings were plunging, and it was about to be canceled. We turned that around. For some reason, Warner Brothers had insisted that the executive producer for the Reverend's program would be the person who had been the longtime executive producer of America's Most Wanted. And the Reverend wouldn't even go to the office and meet with him. He would show up just in time to roll tape. So I said, we're going to make some changes. Looks like they have you on prompter for an hour. And he said, yeah, that's true. Well, come on. I've seen you in church. I've seen you at the conventions. You don't need a prompter. You talk to people. And they said, well, Koppel has a prompter. Well, actually, I saw Ted Koppel shortly after that, and he said, no, I don't have a prompter. I said, no, you're not going to have a prompter, but you can't see the audience, can you? He said, oh, no, they're down below the camera. Like, I can't see them. Said, oh, we're going to put them up on risers so you can see them and talk to them. Well, make a long story short, the broadcast became a hit. We started winning our time periods, first in Detroit, Atlanta, some other, Washington, D.C. In fact, when anyone from NBC News came down the hallway, we were taping at Nebraska Avenue at NBC. They'd come down the hall and then people would say, we love your program, because we had a massive audience share which fed into Meet the Press. And for the first time, Meet the Press was beating CBS Sunday Morning. But it was you all know the Reverend. He was incredibly talented. There were some things I persuaded him to do which he didn't want to do. I wanted him to do a one-on-one with David Duke. And he said, I'm not going to legitimize Duke. I said, no, you're going to delegitimize Duke, which he did. And then the Reverend had an idea, let's do some shows from New York. It was for the May sweeps. And so we went to the Apollo Theater, and he got the idea. He said, let's invite Cosby and Will Smith, and we'll do a show called The Prince and the Papa. And they came. We did some gospel shows, both at the Apollo Theater and in Washington. And at Warner Brothers, I had to go to Warner Brothers every Friday for a budget meeting at my expense on the show's budget. And they thought I'd lost my mind. They said, you're at the Apollo Theater? And you've got the staff, flying there and staying in a hotel. Well, I had the transportation and hotel all done by trade. And Percy Sutton, who thought he owed the Powell family something, he gave me the Apollo Theater for $1 along with the post-production facility.
Wow.
So we could originate shows from the Apollo Theater for thousands of dollars less than taping at NBC in Washington. But I'll just tell you one story which I think addresses some things that people have talked about his vision. At one point, we were on the Warner jet leaving Washington to go to LA. I forget why we were all on the Warner plane. And he was reading USA Today, just sitting there on the table. And he came over and said, let's turn this plane around. I said, what do you mean? This plane can fly transatlantic, right? He said, yeah. Let's fly to Liberia, solve that fighting over there, and that'll be our show next week. And I said, Reverend, you don't own the show yet. It takes 30 episodes for someone to own a show. You watch CBS Sunday Morning, listen to NPR's Weekend Edition. That's how long it takes for the show to really gel. A year from now, you can do that. Well, after the show's the Apollo Theater, I said, Reverend, that idea you had about solving this Liberian Civil War, here's how we're going to do that. You'll fly there next year. You'll fly there, solve the Civil War, and then you invite the parties to come to the Apollo Theater in New York and sign the peace agreement with you. That's going to be the way our show works next year.
Wow.
Well, Warner Brothers, which
Incredible.
the show made a lot of money for Warner Brothers and for the Reverend and for Quincy Jones. So we started talking about renewal. We had just narrowly escaped real embarrassment during the Gulf War because Warner Brothers insisted we tape on Wednesday for air on Sunday. There's a war on. And of course, the Reverend wanted to do an hour on the war each while the war was going on. And I want to stop with another anecdote. He called me. The show ran at, as I said, before Meet the Press in Washington. He called me at 7 a.m, Sunday morning. And he used to call me Reverend Powell. Yeah. Have you seen the Washington Post yet? I said, no, it's at the front door, but I haven't picked it up yet. I'm just getting out of bed. One of the segments in that week's Jesse Jackson show had been devoted to Saddam Hussein holding hostages, American hostages. And during the taping, the one and only time in the 40 programs that we produced for Warner Brothers, his blue cards that were behind, blue cards on the table, and the cue cards behind the audience, which had in his words what that program was about. So that whenever he was lost, he could look up. That's what I'm talking about now.
Hey, Anthony.
The one and only time the cue cards fell down and he knocked over the blue cards. And he telescoped through a segment. He dropped a segment and just went to the next segment. And Lee Thornton, who's a line producer, was sitting in front of me and she balled up her script. Said, Jesse, you fool, threw it at the monitors. And I said, nobody at home will ever know. We'll just take the next segment and do it with an additional commercial break right behind it. No one will ever know what happened. But what happened was between Wednesday taping and Sunday air, Saddam Hussein had released the hostages. So the Reverend called me and said, well, when you pick up the Washington Post, you'll see the headline that Saddam has released the hostages. And you think God isn't watching over this show? So at the end of the year, I said to the people at Warner Brothers, this show has to air live. And they said, oh, can't be done. Why not? And that's when I learned that the Jesse Jackson show was the first time Warner Brothers had ever done live television. They had done filmed entertainment until then. They had never done live television. And the idea of giving me the commercial reel to insert live into the broadcast was something they had never done and they weren't going to do. So that's when they said, well, you call your friends at CBS and have them pick up the show. And I said, no, CBS News will never agree to have CBS run this broadcast. But the Reverend's dream would be to run on CNN. Oh, good idea. You call President of CNN, Tom Johnson, and sell the show to him. I said, well, you guys know Tom Johnson. He was the editor of the LA publisher, I guess, of the LA Times before he moved to CNN. No, you called. So that was Friday afternoon. Monday morning at 9 a.m., I call CNN, ask for Tom Johnson. He takes the call. I had a 30-second pitch. And he said, oh, yeah, I'll call you tomorrow. I thought, yeah, right. Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, he called. He said, we'll take the show under 3 conditions. This is going to get back to something Marquita said. 3 conditions. You come as executive producer. Well, I'm under contract at Warner Brothers and Quincy Jones. Okay, I forget what the second condition was. Third condition was the Reverend has to agree in writing not to run for political office or we'll have equal time problems. And I said, well, you know what? That's going to be between you and the Reverend, and here's his phone number. The Reverend did not agree to do that until November of, well into the season of 1991. And then his program premiered on CNN weekly, produced by Lee Thornton. And I always joked with Quincy. I said, you know, Both Sides with Jesse Jackson, which is a CNN title, that ran longer than Fresh Prince. But the dream had been to actually take the 1 hour Jesse Jackson show and do it 5 days a week. That would have made the Reverend fabulously wealthy. And we're talking about, for the weekly show, some people being paid the equivalent of each week, the equivalent of the median income, family income of the United States. If the Reverend had been able, and I don't know what the Reverend was making from it. The two salaries I couldn't see were the Reverend's and Quincy's, and I didn't want to see them. But the idea of the Reverend they sent me to live with the Oprah Winfrey Show to watch how the best, most popular 5-day-a-week talk show was done. It was incredible. I came back with notes on how to do it. And that was Quincy's dream. And the Reverend didn't really buy into it, even though it made him fabulously wealthy. And then, the show moved to CNN, and Quincy said, okay, Adam, time to produce some movies. And that was the end of my relationship with the Reverend.
Wow.
Powerful.
Adam.
Powerful.
All right, we're out of time.
I need to say one thing, Rich. I want to make a suggestion.
What's that?
Well, I think this was a powerful gathering here. And if you're not aware, in January 1966 is when Dr. King dispatched a young Reverend Jackson to Chicago.
Yes.
I think we need to convene. I think I want to bring in Hermine. This can be reproduced at a much higher level than where we're starting here. I think the story that we want to tell of these journalists is going to be powerful. I don't even think we've scratched the surface of what people can share. And I think this will be a great contribution and a tribute while he's alive. He's alive. And I would like to see us reconvene because a lot of people didn't get to share things. And there are a lot of stories here. Politically,
Jerry,
politics, which just the tip of this iceberg. Yeah.
We're out of time. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. This has been, as the people have said, illuminating. We're going to, or not yet. We are going to take all the comments that were in the chat room and print them out and circulate them to everybody for whom we have email addresses. This whole conversation will be posted on YouTube in the next 24 hours. And thanks everybody, all the guests for being here. I want to thank again our people here in the National Conference of Negro Women conference room, and as well as the Joint Center for Political Studies and Political and Economic Studies for arranging this. And happy holidays to everybody. And I'm glad that people in DC were able to get here despite the early snow we had that turned out not to be disabling as some thought. And happy holidays. I hope to see some of you on January when we have another such discussion. So
Same to you, Richard.
Enjoy the rest of the
Happy holidays. Thanks, Richard.
the rest of the month.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
So picture. The person.